Trump met with Hungarian President Viktor Orban at the White House. We talked a bit about Orban last week and the way he's unwinding democracy in Hungary or really strangling it. But things actually went worse than expected, I think.
Yeah.
Trump told Orban, and I quote, "You're respected all over Europe, probably like me, a little bit controversial, but that's okay. You've done a good job and you've kept your country safe." Trump's ambassador to Hungary told The Atlantic, quote, "I can tell you, knowing the president for a good 25 or 30 years, that he would love to have the situation that Viktor Orban has, but he doesn't." Wow. Ben, that quote tells you all you need to know about Trump. Trump thinks that strangling a democracy to death makes you respected. And one of his best friends says he'd love nothing more to be a dictator. No surprise, this dude is getting a foot rub in the Oval Office today.
That's the truest thing a Trump official said.
It's unbelievable.
Again, I think it's worth reminding Viktor Orban, this is not a close call.
No.
This guy is an authoritarian. He's illiberal. He's kind of neo-fascist. He is set about ending democracy in Hungary, like taking control of the media. People are not permitted to get information that doesn't flow through Viktor Orban's media in most of Hungary. He's packed the judiciary. He's rigged elections. He's basically taken steps to turn this into an authoritarian system. This is like, this is really fucking nuts. Like, this is like, it's in the early 30s, and like FDR is like, you know what? I got a Great Depression going on, and I got all kinds of shit home, but it's fucking time to have Mussolini to the White House, and having fucking Mussolini in the White House and being like, you know what? I really admire those black shirts you wear. You're really tough on the immigrants. You know what? People may say bad things about you, but like you really, showed it to those Ethiopians. Like that's what this guy is.
Let me read it.
He's the tip of the spear of the fucking fascist revival in Europe, a place where this brand of politics leads to very dark places. And Trump is like, yeah, this is great. Like, this is the leader I want to lift up. Of all the Europeans I want to have here, I'm not going to have Angela Merkel or Emmanuel Macron or people who run big, important countries that are democracies. I'm going to have this, like, fucking thug, because he doesn't like George Soros, like, into the White House and talk about what an upstanding guy he is. This is insane.
Orban said, "We must state that we do not want to be diverse. We do not want our own color, traditions, and national culture to be mixed with those of others." He's a white nationalist.
Color traditions, like what? This isn't subtle.
Not subtle at all.
Not a lot of economic anxiety in that quote.
I mean, and I guess like people say, I was having a conversation with a reporter today about taking this kind of meeting, and they're like, well, Obama did, took meetings with the Saudis and other,
yes,
and like that's fair, but no,
it's not fair.
But like, well, here's a point I try to make to them is sometimes you meet with bad actors and you push them on the things they're doing
but
wrong.
It's not just that. This is I'm so angry about this because yes, you sometimes meet unsavory actors, but yeah, for one of two purposes. One, if you are swallowing hard because you have some foreign policy interest. Right? So Americans have been uncomfortable with the Saudi relationship for some time, but it felt like we had to meet with them because they supplied the oil for the global economy, or because something like that, right? Or we don't like China's human rights record, but like shit, we've got to deal with the Chinese. Like Hungary?
Yeah, no, there's no rationale.
This is my point. It's like there's not we talk about these trade-offs in American foreign policy. It's not like we need the Hungarians to maintain the global economy. No offense to the Hungarian listeners of the pod. Like there's no trade-off here, right?
No.
So then the only other reason you'd meet with someone like this, is to press them and be like, hey, release these journalists, or like, I really don't like what you're doing in civil society. And Trump is meeting with the guy to encourage what he's doing on those things, right? So it's the opposite of that, right?
He's taking notes.
It's envy. So to me, you can't shrug this off of like, well, Americans always engage unsavory people. They tend to only have to engage them when they absolutely must, because there's some other overriding interest, or because, they want to press them on those things. But he's meeting the guy to give him a big foot rub and to give him an attaboy for the things he's doing. It's also worth noting for the nerds out there that the European parliamentary elections are coming up in like a couple of weeks. And everybody in Europe has been watching this for months because they're worried, what if these far-right parties get like a strong bloc in the European Parliament and they can like basically grind the EU to a halt. So meeting with Orban, like on the eve of these elections, is sending a message. Somebody, probably not Trump, but somebody around Trump who shares his like neo-fascist impulses is smart enough to be like, well, the time to have Orban is before these elections.
That's exactly right. And mind you, this is also, the Times, I think, reported this over the weekend, that just 2 weeks before these European parliamentary elections, there's a whole bunch of Russian-linked accounts and far-right groups spreading disinformation about more democratic or left-leaning candidates. So, the Steve Bannon Russia worldview is coming together again in a way that supports fascism and far-right parties.
Yeah, and people need to understand that this is like the defining issue of our time, right?
Yes.
Because these people are either going to win or they're not, and Trump is showing all of his cards about which side of this debate he's on. He's on the side of the people who are trying to roll back democracy.
Last thing I wanted to raise, which is a fun one. Not really, but it's notable. So the New York Times...
Belugas to the Queen?
The Belugas of the Queen. The Times over the weekend finally wrote the piece that I feel like you and I have been talking about for months and months and months, which is that all the big swings Trump has taken on foreign policy, let's say that's Iran, North Korea, and Venezuela, are failing. And they're not only failing, but all three of those actors feel emboldened to tell him to go fuck himself.
Yeah.
You have the Iranians saying we're actually going to restart some kinds of enrichment. The Venezuelans, Maduro is essentially mocking Trump and the coup failed. And then North Korea is firing missiles into air on a daily or hourly basis that if Iran fired would lead to a military strike. Yeah. So, I don't know where each of these issues is going to go. They kind of feel like they are driven by Trump's individual need for good headlines about each issue, and how he gets there is different. But it's it was nice to see someone finally put that all together.
Yeah, I don't know, if David Sanger's a friend of the pod, but I mean, part of the reason why we keep coming back to these issues is that this has been unfolding before our eyes for some time. You can now see all the consequences. Maduro's sitting there giving us the finger, North Koreans firing off missiles, Iranians preparing to restart their enrichment program. And that's been building for some time. And the two problems are, for whatever reason, the media hasn't really held him to account on this. To be fair, maybe because they're pulled in a million different directions with Trump. Sure. And Democrats don't like to talk about foreign policy because they want to talk about healthcare, they want to focus on kind of core bread and butter issues. So actually, there's just not a lot out there, not a lot of content out there that is highlighting that this is not working. The presumption in American foreign policy circles, and certainly how the media covers foreign policy, is that there's tough policies and then there's less tough policies. Mm-hmm. But the point here, and toughness is equated with blustery and pulling out of agreements, but this is highlighting the fact that these regimes have sized up Trump, and they're like, sure, he can pop off, but we can tell him to fuck off, right? And just do our thing. And Maduro's not leaving, and the North Koreans aren't giving up their nuclear weapons, and the Iranians aren't capitulating. And there's no evidence to suggest that if Trump keeps doing what he's doing, they will somehow shift course. And I do think that it's really important that Democrats or other voices, civil society, and hopefully the media, is more rigorous in holding Trump to account. I do want to say, I've been pleased by some of the reporters who went along with the kind of Kim Jong-un show. You can tell they're a little pissed about it.
Yep.
I've seen some of these people. I won't name any names, but I've seen them kind of be like, well, he said that his personal relationship with Kim would deliver, and this is proof that it hasn't. And that's good. There's now a track record, and there's a record of things that Trump has said that were going to happen that aren't happening. And people need to keep pointing that out.